All right. So this is actually Surveying American Policing. We were just finishing up the crib walk for there. This is actually policing. Gavin Lewis is here. Excellent. All right. Policing. We all of about 9 minutes out from class, so we'll pick up in about 9 minutes. Let's see. We are on, what chapter are we on? Pull this back up and take a look. Downloads. Oh. Chapter 8. Patrol. We talked about patrol last time. Ooh, I didn't put in chapter 8 in here. Ah. All right. Pop this on here real quick. Chapter 8. Admit. That is not what I wanted to do here. Do 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 do. I'll say chapter 8. Ah, it's not picking the word. Yes. Chapter 8, PowerPoint. Yes. All right. Here, get rid of those things. And oh, let's check the syllabus real quick. Okay. Excellent, excellent. Oh, All right, view. Where is it? Participants. Admit. Maple Avenue. Okay. Got some interesting topics today. Looks like we're into chapter 8, peacekeeping and order maintenance. I'm pulling this up. I can't remember how far we got into it last class. And I've got to post the videos up because I wasn't able to do that before I left on Monday. All right, so we got 2 minutes left. 9 minutes out. And so today, one minute. We're talking about start roll call. Back here. Admit. Okay. All right. So we have got less than a minute when we get started. You know, I might actually pull in some stuff that you guys might like. Got some stuff on domestic relationships and that kind of stuff. So I'll show you guys some of that. Those cases to domestic violence. There's a few of them that are pretty powerful. Let's see here. Boom, boom, boom. All right, it is officially 10 o'clock. So we're moving into chapter 8. I can't remember if we started or not. If we did, let me know where we left off at, because I can remember we started talking about order maintenance stuff a little bit last time. Where we actually got into it's for some reason not telling me where I left off. So probably the biggest theme that you'll get from today's lessons, the itself, is that of role conflict. If you watch as it goes through the different back over here, admit. Ooh. I think that does. Cool. And so the biggest theme that you'll see is we're talking about different topics related to policing in this and order maintenances. That right there, role conflict. Basically, at any point in time, you know what? Let's start out that way. We'll start out by seeing all of the different perspectives of people who are going to take a look at this thing that you do if you're in policing, and have some. How would I want to put it? Some value, some level of determining what your actual role is in a situation, right? Who affects role you take? We'll start out with that as a question for you all. I'm gonna turn on the chat so that way you guys can chat with me. Ooh, something else popping in. Ooh, where is the chat? Ooh, more people popping in. Yay. Admit. Okay. That a little bit. It's still nasty. There we go. Who affects the role you take? So we're going to start out, we're talking about peacekeeping and order maintenance. So we're trying to keep order, maintain the peace, that kind of a thing. Whether you're a police officer or not. That's probably the biggest thing that you do all day long. Oh, oh my goodness. I almost want to go into a theology lesson. Yeah, blessed be the peacekeepers, peacemakers. That's what it is, not peacekeepers. Oh, peacekeepers a different thing. Six, yeah. No, was that peacemaker? I don't remember anymore. That's funny. But basically, what I want you to start thinking about: who affects the role that you would take? If you were a police officer, if you were to put yourself in that shoe, those shoes, and have to engage in the work that you would need to, or if you've ever done that, what are the different types of people who affect you? Like the different, and when I say who, that's what I mean. I mean types. Like, what are we talking about here? The different types of people involved in any type of incident that might take place. Right? You're responding to something, or maybe you're on scene when something occurs, right? Who are the different types of people that are going to affect your actions? You guys have any ideas? Oh, yeah, that's a big one. That one's going to be in the back of your mind if they're not right there watching. Supervisors. What else? We know that you're involved. Supervisors are going to be around. Who else? We're quiet. All right, well, we're going to start walk through that list. So, if you think about an incident that you are on the scene for, be any type of incident. There you go. That's another one. Is there a victim or victims? Yes, that's another good one. Okay. Put that one over here. Dispatch. Okay. So when you're on scene, it's like the victims there, how they're acting, their condition, just the way that they present themselves can have a major effect on them, right? You got someone who's a victim, and it's like you can look at it like disparities in types of events. You look at the different types of victims you might have, like barroom brawl. It's like, yeah, dude was being a jerk. He said some things he shouldn't have. He got popped one in the mouth. Okay, I understand that kind of a thing. Okay, that one's like, I have some sympathies here, right? Or maybe not. And then you might have a different situation where it's like, this is a domestic violence situation where ex-boyfriend or whatever kicked in the door and smacked somebody around for no reason, and they didn't ask for it, that kind of a thing. Certainly, right? And so your response to that in that situation is going to be wildly different. Right? We're dealing with supervisors. That's actually a really big one too. I might hold off on that one just a little bit because it's going to be too close to you in some ways. But we'll carve off over to dispatches. That's a good one too. Like this right here, you have a whole person or maybe a couple of people who might be in between you and the people who need you. Right? It's like the telephone game. The information you get is going to have a major effect, right? What kind of incident am I responding to? Ooh, is this? Ooh, I'll tell you a heck of a story. This is one. I'll tell you this at the end. Actually, that's what I'll do after we get through this thing. I'll tell you the story. It'll highlight some of the stuff. Dispatch. That's a big one because that's like framing. Right? That's like framing for your first initial encounter with the situation. That's a big one. Supervisor's real close, depending on how much oversight you have, how long you've worked there, that kind of a thing. It's like you might have a real good idea on what role that person says wants you to take in that situation. Maybe. Right? Every situation is unique, and so sometimes that's the one you have to figure out as you go. Let's see here. You guys come up with any others?
Witnesses, that'd be one.
Yeah. That's another one. Bystanders. Yeah, you just have people who are standing around. They see things, right? Depending on how that group looks, acts, responds to what's going on. It's like, ooh, that itself can be its own situation, right? Your colleagues. That's a big one. Depending on what's going on, that might be the primary thing that drives somebody's actions, right? Responding to an officer down, boom. It's the only thing you care about. Not really, but in terms of the primary thing on your mind, it's going to be that. Oh yeah, somebody said that word. I like that one. Policies, right? I'm going to put this out by supervisors. Yes. Pardon me. Need some coffee today. Policies and other social conventions. Oh my goodness. That's one of those things where it's the policies in place to some degree, they're going to be dictated by the outside world. To some degree, they're going to be dictated by the inside world. What I mean by that is like, you'll have the stuff that comes through where it's like, yes, we have to do this kind of training because of the fact that new court case came through, and this training is now a requirement that we need to handle, this in this way or something. You take what would be a good example? Taser training or something like that. But that's not even the right term for all. But that might affect policy. That's the external stuff, where it's the outside world. Then you also have the internal world, where it's like something happened within that department where we had to create our own policy on that. Those are always fun because you can find those too. You had to put a policy on that one. Yeah. Who's responsible for that one? Must be that guy right over there. So those are always fun. Those are an extension of your supervisors to some degree because that's going to be on the administrative side. And so that's going to have to do with, you could also put that into like atmosphere, those kind of more abstract kind of things outside of the situation itself. Like that would be the atmosphere of the police department, those types of relationships, that kind of stuff. So that's going to be out there. This one, this one, this one. I'll pull those out for a second. Supervisor may or may not be on scene. Dispatch won't be on scene. Your victims, your bystanders, maybe colleagues might be there, depending on what it is. When you start looking at role conflict, that's the real big one. You also miss this one right here. Perpetrator. Right? They're gonna have some expectations there too. Just trying to come in. Yeah, tech has a big effect because that's one of those things that as technology increases, our ability to well, at least assess what happens starts to increase. Some, not entirely, but that starts to happen, and then our ability to, I guess, have a better control over the options for how things kind of progress. What I mean by that is depending on like what you predict policing, modeling, that kind of stuff. It's like you can have a better idea for what you're walking into. Because some of that stuff, it's like you can have the generalized, okay, here's gonna be your hot days, hot times, hot places kind of thing. Also, you can have it to where it's like as you're responding to a scene, this is the address, these are the people here, and these are the recent issues that have popped up. So we get a little bit of history. And that kind of technology, it's like, ooh, you're right back over here, dispatch. It's almost sort of like having that person, more people in between that actually have good information that they can relate. Dispatch will do their best, but it's different than if you've got something in the system already. Let's see. Right here. This is the big one. First one's who's who. Right? Victims and perps. This is that element they're talking about earlier in the book where they're talking crime fighters. That crime fighter perspective, they'll focus on this one. They want to find the perps and help the victims. Right? It isn't always clear who's who, and if we really look at it, it's something where most things tend to be a lot more gray than people would like to admit. Right? And so you have a call for something. It's like, who's the victim here? Who's the perp? The default way that they usually do that is who called? That kind of thing. Whoever called is more likely to be perceived as your victim. No matter what actually has transpired. That's one of those things. First person, phone call, that's a huge weight there. Not necessarily no matter, but it had a significant effect. How are the people around you responding? Right? You're around a large group, that one's pretty obvious. That thing can go sound really, really, really fast. Anytime that there's like huge high profile cases involving policing and really any social issue, it can be racial in nature or otherwise. Basically, we start looking at here is how is the crowd responding, right? Because if you start looking how the crowd responds, you start making your decisions based off of that. Because when you really look at it, you have all the danger of the person who's perpetrating crime, if you have one. You have all the danger of addressing victims' needs. At the same time, you have a large group of people right here. And one of those is going to be completely outside your scope to be able to handle. It's just you. Then type of call, crime fighter ordinance. Yeah, the type of call has a big effect on it. But you can see this reciprocal nature to some degree that as you respond to stuff, people look at it and they try to identify who's who, what's what, and what you need to do. Right? And it's certainly not immediately clear. Certainly not. Even for the calls that seem straightforward. And then as you move forward and depending on the context, it's like not only does that role conflict become more difficult because you're dealing with these people individually, you can also be dealing with people on the aggregate. And now because of the technology, yeah, it's not just on the aggregate, it's across all people in that one moment of time. That action, those decisions, whatever's transpiring is in front of the entire world. And so huge role conflicts there, right? Just think of when we get to the domestic stuff. Who's the actual aggressor, that kind of a thing. That's not always immediately apparent. And then do they actually want you to do anything about it and what you have to do in the situation? There's all kinds of conflicts there. That's before you get to looking at it from, okay, other people outside are looking and assessing what's being done. And there you go. Will they have all the knowledge they need? Probably not. Will they be able to judge fairly? Maybe yes, maybe no. And so when we start looking at, let's see, this chapter, there's my mouse. Over here, go ahead and do the share screen thing. Boop. All right, I think you can see my screen now. Yes. All right, so it starts out talking about order maintenance. And many officers regard order maintenance as social work because it's not the crime fighter type of thing. It's the stuff that's you're doing good, but it's not like the I don't know, the fun stuff, I guess. Get rid of this real quick. And so, yeah, there's what you want to do, what people think you do, and what you actually do. You guys have all seen those memes, I'm sure, where it's panel here, panel here, panel here. It's like what my mom thinks I do, what my teacher thinks I do, and finally get to what I actually do. It's like, there you go. That's what this one. Here it says, Master Kowski identifies 4 different ways non-crime calls can help improve police effectiveness. Kind of identifies that crime prophylactic basically means being out there, you start dealing with deterrence. From there, police knowledge, you increase your ties, your knowledge of the community. Social work, you're actually doing good. Community side is you're increasing those ties. But really, it's like that ordinance and stuff. It's sort of like the things that attracts people to the job. There's things that you do, and there's the capacity for the things that you can do. Right. And they use all that to attract people. And talk a little bit about that in the recruiting side. Here we'll look at is like how many advertisements you've seen in the last I don't know, 20 years related to policing, and how many of them would be what society deems like cool, that kind of a thing. It's like some of them are the good ones where it's kind of community oriented. Then you have the ones that are cool where it's like, hey, this guy got into a great big decommissioned military vehicle and is tearing through the road, that kind of a thing. It's like different expectations. All right. Next up, public expectations. Here's what it is. Maintain society. Yes. Social boundaries, unpleasant situations, emergency services. That's the kind of stuff they talk about. When they talk about counterpunching, I think what they're talking about there, I have to check the book, is that code that you think of. Use the police as a hammer sometimes. Right? Someone's irritating you, something like that. You can use the police to handle the situation, that kind of a thing. It's like I think I may have mentioned this last class, I can't remember. Like homeowners associations or those low level municipal ordinances, right? How long is your grass? That kind of stuff. There'll be people who call about that just because they want to do that. Whenever you're dealing with that, you have to recognize it for what it is and handle it appropriately. Because if you don't, guess what? The person who was basically neutral will now have a negative perception towards you. And the person who is negative to begin with, that's already harassing somebody else, is using you to do it. They now know that they can use you to do it. And they still probably don't have a positive perception of you either. The world just got a little bit worse. That kind of a thing. Police response. They exercise a great deal of discretion in handling non-crime incidences. Handle situations informally and take no action. What can we say about that? I feel like talking about report writing. It makes me on thinking about it. Discretion is the name of the game for something that's non-criminal. But ideally, you don't want that to get worse. So it's like whatever way you can find to handle the situation as peaceably as possible is what you want to do. Traffic enforcement's next. Ooh. All right. Here it says it's the most, of course, it's the most common. It's the major source between friction between police and citizens. It's the primary way you're going to come into contact with people. Is there really anything I need to talk about in there? Not really. Formal policies, informal policies, that kind of stuff. Crackdowns. All right, so here's where they start talking a little bit about some of those policies. So there are not policies, but some of the things that you can do on the streets. There's a whole bunch of stuff like this. Crackdowns are whenever they have a short time period where they focus specifically on some type of issue, and ideally, what it is to drive it down. Usually, what will happen is it's like I'll give you an example. Little Rock, I think it was Little Rock, probably about 7 years ago. They had maybe more years than that, maybe 10. Big issue. What had happened was it was A few people who like to steal cars had moved into town. And what had happened is over the course of a few months, the number of car thefts went way up. And so pretty quickly, the police already know. It's like, okay, we just got to catch them, that kind of a thing. And so what they did is they had a crackdown on that for a short period of time. But the people who were actively doing it, the ones who were driving up the numbers, they were able to identify those people and pull them off the streets. And then you're able to build that number a little bit. That number's going to go back down some. It's not going to go to zero, but it's not going to have that same spike that it had before. Whether it's you know, car thefts, drunk driving, that kind of. Yeah, those are all different types of things that can be assessed or addressed in traffic, that kind of stuff. Here it says arrests are time-consuming events. Crackdowns are difficult to sustain. Yes. It also mentions roadblocks. Roadblocks are different than crackdowns. I think we talk more about those in procedures. We'll talk about the different types of things they do. Roadblocks are a little bit interesting because you have to have some compelling interest there that you're actually addressing, and just identifying criminal actions. That's not it. That kind of a thing. All right. Next up. So here's where it starts talking about domestic. So there's a lot to talk about in this. It's funny because there's not really a whole lot there. So what we should talk later this first, domestic situations. Anytime you're dealing with this, realize that what you're dealing with is not just the two people you're dealing with, but the connection between them. So, of course, relationships, that kind of a thing. I'll use a philosophical tenet. The whole is more than the sum of its parts, that kind of thing. God, I wish I could remember who actually said that. But that whole, that's funny. That statement about the whole being more than the sum of its parts. It's the same thing for relationships as it is for, your vehicle kind of thing. Between those two people, that relationship, that's something else entirely. That's also between the two of them kind of thing. And so now you're having a third party come in. There's been some type of issue take place. How many different types of relationships are there? I don't know. How many different types of people are there, and how many different unique interactions could you have between all of those? Every one of those is different. So that means every single relationship is different. And so to some degree, you'll know what to expect, maybe, but no. Even just from the get-go. It involves two or more people engaged in intimate relationships. So right off the bat, we've gone off into the territory of that doesn't sound quite right? Two or more people. It's like usually people start talking about that kind of stuff that says you're down to two, where it balances out from there. Start dealing with children, that kind of thing, or maybe other people in the home. What are you talking? Step parents, sit by that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it's actually one of the things that's interesting. What was it? That's a juvenile stat. Those with step parents get abused the most, I think, but it wasn't by the step parent, it was by the parent. And that I can't remember. That's off topic. That's not policing. All right. Relationships, the subsequent thing, the primary thing. Violence, it says here, is usually an assault. That's one of those that's kind of funny, because, well, criminal law, we were just going through violent crimes, and the first thing of consequence is knowing whether you're dealing with an assault or a battery, right? Depending on what state you're in, they're classified different ways. So assault's probably the lower level of the two. Batteries, when things actually get physically violent. And most people, when they say the word violence, they mean physically violent. They don't mean threatening or behavior necessarily. They might, but that itself is a little bit of a distinct thing. So we have to kind of acknowledge that a little bit. Yeah, because you get to real violence, all of it's battery. In this state, as soon as you touch somebody, that's where you're at. Intimate partner violence has decreased substantially from 95 to 2015. This is the second I mentioned this today. The Violence Against Women's Act of 1994. That's fine. I can't remember if the book talks about it much. If it does, great. If it doesn't, what you need to know is that basically it gave teeth to domestic violence situations. It allows, what was it? If I remember correctly, it allowed women to be able to file lawsuits and that kind of stuff. And it also, it put teeth in it. That's all I can remember. So I can't remember exactly how it got it to where you could basically force an enforcement kind of thing, law enforcement. Typically, I'll talk about that here in a second. Domestics. Actually, just wait a second to show. All right, so many domestic victims do not call the police. That's actually the actual rule, right? If you look at it, if you were to just say as a general rule, yeah, people are not going to call. When you look at the economic aspects of it, like, are there economics aspects of it? Yes, to some degree, but probably not like what most people would think. Usually, what they think is, that it's a low income kind of thing. It's like, no, it's just when you start getting to those other classes, that what happens is they're not reliant on the criminal justice system to address it. They've got other resources, right? Here it says, now middle class women turn to their private resources for help. It's like, yeah. And that just carries on from there. That's one of those things. If you're talking about like violence, domestic violence, okay, it's everyone. It's just one of those things. It's crazy. You could look at the police themselves, kind of things. Like sometimes that happens there too. People are violent. Here's where it starts getting into a little bit more. So, you're encountering a domestic disturbance. What are your options? Well, it really depends. When we start talking about history, historically, that remember, kind of go back to the 1994 thing. Prior to that, one of the standard ways to handle these types of domestic situations was to not. That's a personal thing, right? I can Balustrade versus Pacifica is one of the ones that identifies whenever police actually have responsibility to protect you. That was a domestic situation there. That was kind of nasty to read. There's quite a few of them though. I'm drawing a blank on the one I really want to pull up for it. You think the name Romero, but I don't think that's it. But basically, what you'll see is how they're handled. Up into the 80s, it would not be uncommon for you to find literal verbatim, like quoted comments from police officers responding to domestic violence situations, where they would ask the victim, okay, so what'd you do to ask for it? Ew, that's ew. And so that was one of the things that they had to address back then when we have started making pretty good numbers for it, pretty good strides. In terms of responses, here are your ranges right here from arrest all the way to nothing, right? So nothing is still an option. It's just not going to be a default option. Usually it's going to be that middle one right there. Separating of parties. If there's something serious enough to actually call somebody in, you're going to be probably doing that. Here also mentions, social services agencies, mediation, with other options. But there you go. Factors that discourage officers from making arrests. Domestic violence is a private matter. Arrests are dismissed because the victims do not pursue the case, and victims ask police to do something other than make the arrests. So there's that role conflict right there, boiled down as succinctly as you can get it. I mean, look at that. One, yes, of course it's a private matter. That's a relationship thing. That's between two people and in the privacy of their own home. I'm being called in for whatever reason, right? And even whenever I address it in the short term, it's like, okay, now that short term thing's been addressed, that's what's going on with the long term there. those people involved more than likely are still going to be bound in the long term. Okay, so what's best for both parties, either party, victim, perpetrator? Do those things still align? Because if they do, then how do you manage that? Because they're tied together. So if I address the perpetrator, I'm actually harming the victim here now too. I don't know what to do. And the best one, the pleas for something else, right? Don't make the arrest. And then it's like if you have an officer that's in a high population area or a place where they've got some issues with that, it's like ask them how they do the math. Because what's the math for them? It's going to be taking all that into account and then taking account all their personal knowledge for all the instances they've had to deal with Edwards. Okay. Do I listen to this person, give them what they want, or do I do something else? Because, hey, what I've seen in the past might show me that if I don't do anything at all, that person who's asking me not to do something may end up dead. Oh, it gets rough. It's very rough. Arrests require work and the low value placed on domestic violence arrests. So that's going to be within the police department, kind of the atmosphere, other things that would dissuade officers from taking action here. The work involved and the associated value, because it's always going to be a messy one. So no matter what it does, it's not going to be a clean win kind of a thing because there's no winning. It's a relationship. There's no winning there at all. I'm making a joke now. I thought that was funny. Sorry. Actually, yesterday was the 20th anniversary of the day I met my wife. One of those things, that kind of thing's been on my been coming off a whole lot of bad humor. She did not find it that funny. Let's see. Revolution in policy. Yeah, here's where they start talking about policy changes. So when we start getting into areas where you have mandatory arrests and that kind of stuff. Suits that mandated arrests in cases of all felonious assaults. So basically, anytime you get the threshold at which they can identify that someone has crossed into felony violent territories, right? Once you've done that, that's where you go. Bruno versus Scott versus Hart. And it might have been Scott versus Hart. I was thinking. I don't think it is though. I want to say that name had an R in it. Might have been that one there is. I don't know. I'll think of the case I'm thinking of. I don't remember those. But basically, there's so many in common that the themes they just stand right out. All right. Impact of arrest on domestic violence. So this is the Minneapolis domestic violence experiment. Arrests produced lower rates of repeat violence and separation or mediation. That was in the 80s, right? Impact of mandatory arrest made us fear calls and made sure people from calling the police for fear that they themselves may be arrested. Okay, so there's 3 or 4 things we're probably going to talk about later that slide. First one. Arrest versus separation and mediation. You start getting off into some degree of deterrence theory right there. Of course, you also have it bound with the time. So it's like you can't just take the findings of a study and say that is what it is because society changes, right? So that finding right there may not be the same if how society presents itself today. Always interesting. The impact of mandatory arrest laws, though, policies related to it. Yeah, it's negative in nature. As soon as you take away people's choice, what happens every time you take away their choice? They don't feel good about it, I'm sure, right? Now, if I call, the severity associated with it's immediate, right? It's no longer, hey, can you come here and just kind of help me handle this, to someone's getting the cuffs thrown on. Or, hey, now that I've called everybody's attention, I'm going to be the one who's wearing the bracelets, that kind of a thing. We can also talk, since we were talking a little bit about societal shit, that kind of thing. That's the one where you can actually see society changing in some significant ways there. I forget who it was I was talking to. It might have been someone in this class, actually. I would mention that they had heard police officers in a situation where they're responding to domestic violence situation. And one of the officers actually said, to a male, well, what did you do to deserve the violence kind of thing? It's like, yeah, because that's kind of where society is in some ways. Like that's still just as bad as whenever it was the other way around. And that's what's so funny. It's very interesting. It is. All right, next slide. Lautenberg Amendment. I don't remember this one. Oh, I do remember this one. Domestic violence is one of those things that puts you carrying a firearm. Golly, how much time do we have here? 10:38. I don't have enough time to go into that one fully. Basically, what I want to tell you about that when it comes to violence and firearms owning. So, domestic violence is one of those that's will preclude you from being able to purchase a firearm. That's at the surface level. I don't know if that really needs too much explanation. I think. Yeah. So it's interesting because the constitutional rights associated with it, but from a functional perspective and the way that those situations arise, you have all of the danger that's associated with domestic relationships. You also have all the danger that's associated with giving someone a loaded gun and telling them they only need to use a phone call to activate it. How is that for mixing metaphors there? Yeah, so it's like we're literally dealing with loaded guns here. Whether it's in the person's hand or it's in someone else's hand, they've got somebody on the phone, that kind of thing. Realize that people do both. I'll refer you back to the HOA thing. Sometimes people only look to control others. Sometimes people use the police to do so. And so this is one where there's all of the good that comes with keeping people who are violent from getting firearms, along with all the bad of, hey, there are people who might look to control someone's access to firearms through using this just for nothing more than sheer evil or will to do harm. Whether it's that's one where it's like it wouldn't really matter what type of relationship you're talking about there, because that happens. People use this system to regulate relationships. Next up. It changes topics. Oh, I didn't see this. What's this say? Question anything about scholars because of when it comes to, so I got a question about domestic violence calls down because of arrest policies. Part of it's going to be that. Part of it's going to be the way that society interactuates the issue. Really, to be honest with you, that's one. It's really a stark contrast if you go back and read like cases from the 80s versus today. So basically, what's happened is in just a few short years, the cultural treatment of that issue changed massively. It did. It went from something where it was like, if I said "Pow zoom straight to the moon," right? Maybe you'd catch that one. Probably wouldn't necessarily catch the black and white honeymooners TV shows that it came from. You might catch the Futurama reference from a cartoon, right? That's the violence that used to be acceptable in society. I'm gonna hit you so hard, I'm gonna knock you off this planet, right? And that's the guy talking to his wife. It's like, ew, right? That's not what we do anymore. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is because of those who do engage in it now. They are in that dangerous situation of, if I make this call, is it going to make it better or is it going to make it worse? And that's always the danger. We had the same conversation in criminal law actually earlier. It was related to removing crimes against persons. We're talking about your rape and your sex-based crimes. Like, well, what we had in all of our advances, we finally got the element focused back on consent. But with all the new tools we have, what have we done? Now, every text message that you've ever sent to someone can be used to show that you've given consent for something. It's like, that's horrible because that lasts forever. And how can you tell the difference between that and the verbal thing that no one reported? Like, yeah, right. And so you're right back into that territory where we're trying to make this movement towards good. But that element of evil, you just can't address it naturally in this way. It's going to be there. You have to have some way to assess it. And evil is probably the best word I can think for it. Malevolence, maybe. I don't know. All right. Next, it moves into prostitution. I don't know. There was a change order. Rush probably played with that, I guess. So here's where it gets into some of the ordinances of stuff you'll find in the bigger cities. Probably the most colorful way, I'll put it that way, I've ever heard it referred to by anyone was herding. They didn't use the word prostitute, so they used a different word. It was a shorter word, started WH. Yeah, that's what it was. And basically what that person was doing at the time was they were in a large city, they're in the business district of the city at night, which is where those are going to pop up in some degree. Turn off their lights, slow roll down the street. Take this block. And that's what they do. And they do it real slowly over a period of about 5 minutes. They'd move, maybe a couple of blocks. And in doing that, what they were doing was as the prostitutes get set up on one street corner, it starts slowly moving over there. So that way the prostitutes can see that they're coming, break apart, disperse, go set up somewhere else. As they get set up somewhere else, here he comes again. Then the break up, and in that way, you are getting to some degree deterrence and incapacitation. And so it's like you can do it to some degree, but realize the difficulty of what's involved. That's something that's got to be active 100% of the time for it to work, right? And it's not gonna work all of the time. It's like that. That's very effective, a very effective way of doing it. But at the same time, you tied up somebody entirely, right? And only for one place. It's like Sun Tzu, protection versus attack. Protection takes 3 times the effort. It's like that's at minimum. That's baseline, right? Here it gives you the different types of prostitutes: street walkers, bar girls, skeezers, brothel prostitutes, call girls. Didn't know there were so many different types. Yeah, so basically, I guess skeezers crack cocaine. I've not heard that one. I'd heard the phrase before, but I didn't realize that was one that they actually tried. I need to look back at that. That's funny. What do I want to say about this? It's a typology kind of thing. When you start dealing with typologies, realize the context there is going to be so different that it's going to have major effects on how you handle those types of situations as a police officer, right? Dealing with a street walker is going to be different than dealing with, your brothel kind of thing. You'll still find brothels, but it's like, here mentions the legal ones. That'd be like out in California, or like massage parlors, that kind of thing. That's another place where you can run into those kind of activities, those behaviors, right? Police departments concentrate their enforcement efforts on street walkers. Why? Because that's what they do. Right? Those are the most visible ones there. You look at these, it's like those are going to be the most visible. In terms of what they've listed here as skeezers, it's like really those and streetwalkers. I don't know if I'd necessarily make too much of a difference or distinction there myself, but that's going to be different than those other 3. Right? 2 of those 3 are going to have some type of location directly attached to them, and the other one's one that's I guess appears whenever you make a call. I don't know. And so if you look at that, those are all different issues you'd have to address very differently because it's the exact same kind of behaviors. Which one's of most importance? The most visible. The one that causes the most problems in society, I guess. I don't know if I get to go so far as to say that. There you go. Next up, primary police objective said keep streetwalkers confined and then prevent related disorders from breaking out. Sex trafficking. Here's where it starts talking about specialized units, that kind of stuff. Basically, what you're trying to do there is, well, enforce the laws, but also that victim service stuff. Okay, so the better line you are there, the more you that. Of course, that's one that's I guess kind of a hot topic in today's society. That's one where it's not always the easiest to discuss. Here's one interesting thing. It says difficult for several reasons. Victims crimes with no complaining party. Yeah, I don't know what I want to say about that. Other than the fact it's like, oof, there's a lot I want to say related to that. Basically, what I'll say there is, even in your most victimless crimes, those who are satellite to it and negatively affected, they're your victims. With this one, it's like, the fact that they even put that in there like that. It's like what happens is that there's such regulation and control over those people that there's no way that they can notify anybody. That's a completely different thing than it being a victimless crime. Police must initiate investigations on their own. There you go. Conflicting public attitudes regarding its legitimacy, that kind of stuff. And then from there, it moves into other. What's kind of interesting about this now that I'm looking at it, and we're wrapping up the class, it's almost like a list of the types of groups that society looks as negatively upon, right? Those who have in public places. Yeah, that's excellent. If you start looking at that, these we're talking prostitution, domestic violence. We start talking domestic violence, what most people think of are the poor because they're the ones that police get called into because they don't have those resources. So you see the poor, you deal with those who sell sex. Those are well, not usually poor. Those might start out poor. Then some people make a lot of money doing that stuff. It's really horrible. Next one's homeless, right? What's the other word I'm looking for? Not downside. I can't think what it is. This is one where they say reactive police responds to complaints rather than proactively work on behalf of the homeless to prevent problems. You'll see that this is one of those areas that society's massively changing on that as the economy changes and all other changes take place. Big issues because a lot of people not receiving the services that they need, not receiving base needs, that kind of stuff. And when you start looking at some of the issues that go along with it, you have to cross-reference it with the next one with mental ill, because to some degree, there's a large percentage of that population, almost population, but that's actively a choice, not necessarily a circumstance. I say large, I think it's not a majority. I don't know. I can't say that, but it is. There's a significant element of that there too. And so separating out all these issues and addressing them is not easy. Handling it for what is best to you or the parties involved or everyone else who's watching, not easy at all. And so we'll pick up with the rest of this. We'll finish this one out next time and then roll into probably a review for the next exam. With that, if you guys need anything, let me know and I will catch you after fall break. Y'all take care and have a great day. Bye.